Hi everyone, how are you guys doing today? Thursday afternoon, we're here on our second Thursday afternoon. It's so good to be here with you guys. And I am dancing off into semi-uncharted territory this afternoon. People have been asking me to talk about high school. I am going to talk about high school. I am going to do it in such a way that I give you a lot of resources that we have found for you to go and check out. But first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Pam Barnhill. I blog and run a business at pambarnhill.com. It is a homeschooling website for moms who are in the thick of homeschooling and looking for a little down-to-earth help and information. So, hi Bethany, and hi Heather, and hello Dawn, and Meg is here. It's so nice to have all of you guys here with me. So I have 3 homeschooling podcasts. I have the Homeschool Snapshots podcast, which is where I interview homeschooling moms. I also have the Homeschool Solutions Show, which is an audio blog of homeschooling content. So just like an audio book, but instead this is an audio blog. So a lot of those favorite blog posts that you love, you can listen to them through the Homeschool Solutions Show. And then I also have Your Morning Basket, which is all about morning time in your homeschool. So those are the 3 homeschooling podcasts I have, and I'm so excited because next Tuesday is the very first Your Morning Basket podcast of the season, and it is Dawn Garrett and myself, and we will be talking about getting your morning time off to a good start for the school year. So that's coming out next week, and then after that we roll into our guests, and then the first Homeschool Snapshots podcast is coming out the week after that, and it's with Leslie Richards, who is the author of The Homegrown Preschooler. But very interestingly enough, she has graduated one child already, and we spent quite a bit of time talking about all of the surprises that came along when she started homeschooling high school. So that's kind of appropriate. So that's not the 23rd, but the 30th. I'm trying to add 7 in my head. So the 30th of August. That'll be a really good one for you guys who are interested in high school. And we'll throw up another few podcast suggestions as we go along in this conversation today. So, what makes me even able to talk about high schooling when my oldest child is only 11 years old? Well, I will tell you, I did spend 7 years teaching high school when I was a public school teacher, and I worked very closely with a number of students through the yearbook program. That was what I did when I was a teacher. I produced yearbooks and taught students how to produce yearbooks. So I worked pretty closely with those kids. So I am used to working with high school. That really is kind of my natural habitat as compared to elementary school. I enjoy it a lot more. And then we also spent quite a bit of time this summer and the past spring designing our co-op, designing the secondary courses in our homeschool co-op. And so that got me a lot quicker into things like high school credit and what constitutes a high school credit and those kinds of things than I thought I would be. I was really kind of having to explore those things for the parents in our co-op, and as we were designing these classes for our co-op, and I didn't think I was going to have to do that for another few years. So I do have a tiny bit of experience, but most of what we are going to do today is point you to what I feel like are going to be good and helpful resources for you to use for teaching high school and answering some of those high school questions that you might have. And so I think probably one of the biggest questions that a lot of people have, because for the most part, you guys have been homeschooling for years and years, and it's not like, everything changes. It's just your kid gets a little bit older, but everybody gets kind of really worked up about the whole idea of having to keep a transcript. And then you're getting closer to where this little bird is going to fly the nest. And so you want to make sure you have prepared them, whether that be for college, because they're going to fly the nest and go to college, or for something else. And so I think that's where a lot of our anxiety comes up. And for a lot of us, this is the first time that somebody else is actually going to judge the work we've done as homeschooling mothers. And, if your child hasn't taken any kind of standardized tests where, the scores have gone to anyone else, if you haven't been having portfolios evaluated or something like that, this is the very first time that you feel like you're being judged by an outside source on the academic nature of your homeschooling. So for transcripts, well, let me start with just general homeschooling advice. So one place that you can go, because I know a lot of people feel like once you get into the high school years that the amount of information that's available online, especially from bloggers, kind of falls off a lot. There's a lot of blogs and information for people who are homeschooling elementary age children. But as you get into the middle school and the high school years, what information is available there? And a couple of blogs that you can check out. There's one called Education Possible, and this is done by two bloggers, Megan Zeckman and Susan Williamson, or Williams. I can't remember quite exactly what Susan's last name is. But they are both in Florida, and they have a great blog that really kind of starts you in the middle school years. So that is a good place to go and look for information. And then Sweetness and Light is another blog. Oh gosh, I can see her face. I know her name. Meredith. She has that blog, and she also writes a lot. So she's graduated a couple of kids, and she's got an ebook on homeschooling high school. It's not as hard as you think. And so that is another place where she is actively writing posts about different things that she is doing with her high school students, and she's graduated one and she's sent them off to college. So that is another good blog to go check out, and then she has that ebook there. So if you're kind of looking for sisters in the trenches of people who are doing homeschooling. Also, this made me think, Dawn, I'm sorry, I'm throwing another, I told you once I got started I would have a million links. The conversation I had with Erin Hassett, and it was a Homeschool Snapshots conversation. We talked a lot about kind of how her expectations changed about what she should be teaching her high school students once she had graduated a few and sent them out into the world. So if you have high schoolers, that would be a really great conversation to listen to as well. So just kind of wisdom of mamas who are doing this or mamas who have gone before. Yeah, I always do it to you though. I know, I'm sorry. So that's some good place to kind of get some camaraderie and information, and just kind of being in touch with a community of people who are at this point homeschooling high schoolers. Now, if you're looking to make a transcript, a few resources for you on making transcripts. Janice Campbell actually has a little book on making transcripts. She was I interviewed her for the very first episode of the Homeschool Snapshots podcast. So that would be edsnapshots.com/1. We didn't talk a lot about high school then, but she does. She teaches, she has some high school literature courses she's developed, and she also has a book about how to create transcripts. And Rachel just mentioned another name that I was going to mention to you, and that is Lee Bentz. So Lee Bentz runs a website called The Home Scholar, and on there she really does provide you with honestly as much hand-holding as you would want or need for making transcripts. I mean, she really, has a consulting service where she will take you by the hand and walk you through the process. She also has some books that are available. These really easy little, I think she calls them coffee break books, real easy to read, short little books that are available on Amazon. And so for just a few bucks, you can pick one of those up and get some of her wisdom about homeschooling high school and making a transcript and things like that. So Janice Campbell's transcript book and Lee Bentz's transcript books on Amazon, and then also on her website as well. That's another place that you can go. So I think high school, honestly, you're going to be working on this transcript, and I have read and read more information about how colleges are becoming very homeschool friendly, and that a lot of times a transcript is not even the most necessary piece of getting into college. You want to have a high schooler who can write a really great college entrance essay and kind of show how they stand out from some of the other applicants that might be out there. And so that is something you're really going to want to work on, those writing skills, because they're going to be so important all throughout college. I would say just beyond your ability to read, your ability to write and write well is going to be the thing that serves you best if you have a child who's thinking about going into college. And then even if you have a child who isn't, you know, a child who can write clearly and plainly, who may be going to get some kind of computer certification and then move right into some kind of computer job, or, you know, just thinking about some of my family members who recently did not go to a 4-year university. I have a niece who graduated a couple years ago, floored all of us because she decided she wanted to be a mortician, and you know, did her mortician program. It was a couple of years long and now has passed all of her state and national boards and those things. And she did have to write well to be able to do that program and to pass that program, even though she wasn't going into the 4-year college program. And now she's very happy with what she does, which makes us all kind of giggle a little bit. So we call her the beauty queen mortician. And then I have another brother who went on to do a degree in like avionic electronics or something like that, and it was a 2-year program, and he's been working in that field for 10 years, and he's very happy in that field. So 4-year university, not necessarily always the way to go to be very fulfilled in what you do. Okay, Rachel's asking, how do we accommodate children who are dyslexic but love writing? Well, at this point, Rachel, I still think I would be scribing for them. I would be teaching typing, and I can't speak a lot to dyslexia, so I will refer you to Marianne Sunderland's site, and that is Homeschooling with Dyslexia. And she has graduated, sometimes Marianne's on here, and she's not today, but I think she's graduated 3 kids, at least 2 of whom were dyslexic, and then she has, excuse me, Marianne, 8 or 9 children, 8 I think, and 7 of them total are dyslexic. She has all the way down to like age 7 or 8 right now. And so she is a great resource for anything having to do with dyslexia. And I know that I had recently heard that even in college, if you have a student who has been diagnosed with dyslexia, even in college they provide accommodations for them for things like note takings. Either the professor will provide them with a copy of the notes, or they have a note taker who comes with them to class. So there are accommodations for dyslexic students all the way up to you know, in the college ages. So if you are dealing with homeschooling one at home, you know, definitely check out Marianne's site, but also consider that, you know, he's not writing or she's not writing simply because they won't, but because it's such a struggle. And so while you're going to continue working on the skills of getting that writing down on paper, you're also going to scribe for them or allow them to talk into something like a dragon, speech recognition. Well, and that's the thing, Rachel, is if they are going to, if universities and other programs are going to be legally required to give them accommodations, I do believe there has to be an actual diagnosis done. And so that might be a reason to consider going ahead and having an actual diagnosis done. If you have a child who you feel like probably suffers from dyslexia and they want to go to college, then that would be a really good reason, even if it costs you some money out of pocket to do that. But Marianne Sunderland's going to be your best resource on things like that, because I don't want to say anything that I don't, you know, that would get me in trouble. So certainly go to her. And then, so I've given you transcript resources. Another great resource for kids or for starting to teach kids for going into college, Susan Wise Bauer has a little audio MP3 on teaching kids to work independently. So if you are faced with a middle school child and you're at that point where you're like wanting to turn more and more over to them, what is an appropriate amount to expect them to do? What are some of the steps you can take in order to foster that independence and get them working in that direction? Then Susan's talk at Peace Hill Press is a really great talk that you could do to get those kids going into independent learning. And so I highly recommend. Yes, Dawn's going to throw up the link in just a minute, Mimi. And also Susan has another one there that I have not heard about independent high schoolers. So you might want to check that one out as well. I just haven't heard that one and can't recommend it. But I find Susan's talks very approachable and very filled with practical, kind of down-to-earth wisdom there as well. And then there is information. So if you are going to issue your child a high school credit for something, there's information on the HSLDA website, and we're going to drop that link for you as well on how you do that. And so a lot of times it is working through a text. This is one way that you can do that. So let's say your child wants to work through a marine biology text or an apologia biology text or a chemistry text or something of that nature. And so most curriculum writers have determined that about 75%, completing 75% of the material constitutes completing the text. And if you do that, then you can issue that child a credit for that subject. The other way you can do it is by tracking hours, and the hours range from, oh, I looked it up, hold on. I know 180 is the high end, and I'm trying to see what the low end is on that one. Of course, I forgot it. 120 to 180 hours of work. And so what you need to consider is any direct instruction time that you're doing with them, but also homework time. And so you would need to take and divide out the number of weeks you're doing, divide that number by the number of weeks you're doing, and this is about how many hours of work you're going to have to do each week. And so as you're planning for that high school student, you need to plan for that many hours of work. And so Dawn is saying tracking hours is painful. I would think that the way I would probably do it, Dawn, is tracking it on the front end as I am planning what I want them to do and shooting somewhere between that 120 and 180 hours with my planning, and then just making sure we don't get too far off of that in the execution. Mimi says, so a child who works independently needs to track hours. Once again, I think I would do it in the planning phase. This is how my brain would work on it, is as I'm going into planning, let's say a high school literature course, if I'm going to kind of plan one from scratch, then what I would do is I would plan for them to have 120 to 180 hours of work in the year, and then make sure that they're hitting that. So I would do it in the planning as opposed to just like throwing stuff at them, throwing a bulk of work at them, and then like tracking it afterwards. Okay, so Mimi is saying, where can you find a reference to the hours? That's on the HSLDA website. And as far as how do you plan inside that range, it's going to take some trial and error. It's going to take some seeing how it works. And I have not done it beyond doing it for co-op. And basically what we did is we divided out we shot for 150 hours. We meet about 30 weeks out of the year for co-op. And so we estimated that we as teachers would need to provide about 3 hours of work each week for the students in a subject for them to, for us to tell their parents, okay, we've given you enough work that if your child has completed all of this, you can issue them a credit. And so 1 hour of that each week is actually spent in the class. And so we actually planned for 2 hours worth of homework. And honestly, we were estimating, we're going to watch it this year. We're going to see how it goes. We're not going to be that far off. So we're shooting for 150. The range is 120 to 180. We're not going to be that far off either way. So I think you shoot somewhere in the middle of the range for what you're planning, and then you watch it carefully and just see about how much that child is completing, about how long it's taking them, and make sure that you're giving them enough, and that I think you're going to know if you're killing them. I think you're going to know if you're going way over what you need, but make sure that you've given them enough as you go. And like I said, this is something I don't have a lot of experience with, and that's why I'm pushing you guys towards these other resources that you can check out. And as we get closer, I will be figuring it out a little more. So, okay, who decides what the right content is if you follow rabbit trails? This is a place where I would probably go back to things like the Well-Trained Mind, where she actually does suggest letting your kids do in 11th and 12th grade, letting them do kind of a self or independent study where they're studying some things. And so if your child really takes off and gets an interest in astronomy, I don't think it's a horrible thing at all, even though that's not necessarily your standard high school science, to let them study astronomy for that year and to issue them a credit in high school science for that astronomy study. Also, another thing to take into consideration as you're planning high school for your child, if you have a state that has specific requirements, you definitely want to meet those requirements, even if you have to be a little bit creative in how you do that. And I think Lee-Benz is a great resource for that. But also, if you don't have a state that has specific requirements, but you know that your student is college bound, or you have a state that does have specific requirements and your student is college bound, I would go to those colleges. I would go to the colleges that my child is interested in. I would talk to the admissions office at those colleges, and I would ask them, what do you like to see? What would you like to see on a transcript? What are your requirements for entering freshmen? And, we kind of get hung up a lot of times on what the requirements for a state is, but I think maybe even, especially if you don't have them, don't worry about what the high schoolers in your particular state are doing. Go straight to the college and find out what the college is requiring if your child is college bound. So what do they want to see? What kind of requirements do they have for incoming freshmen, and tailor your studies towards those colleges that your child is interested in. So a non-college bound student in a state with no requirements, I think then you just give them a great education and you don't have to worry about jumping through the hoops. Then that goes back to your vision. That goes back to the vision you've written for your homeschool and what you want them to learn. And so I think you have a lot of freedom there. You obviously want to equip them to do well in life. I think too, an important thing to remember is just because your student isn't college bound right now doesn't mean they might not be in 4 or 5 years. So at least give them that base preparation. So if they change their mind in a few years, they have the skills that they need to go. So that's something else to think about as well. Meg is saying dual enrollment with a community college. Yes, if you have students who are college bound, I think that's a good idea. I'm a big believer in, if your budget allows it, outsourcing a lot of those high school classes to online. I am really not going to try to teach advanced logic or Latin or anything like that, or even other languages. Once we get past our initial Latin, if nobody goes on to continue with Latin, but they do want to learn Spanish or French, this is something that, as my budget allows, I'm going to outsource to online classes if I can't find a local teacher. So that is something you can do too. And it feels like there was something really important I want to say, and I forgot an important step. But anyway, So just throwing a bunch of resources at you. I am going to wrap this up. If you guys have any more questions, put them down into the comments down there, and we can always try tagging some people like Marianne and like Meredith and some people like that, and see if they can't come over and join into the conversation for some of the high school questions that we have here. Yeah, calculus and statistics, no thanks. It's either going to a tutor or it's going to an online class. So there you go. I hope some of this was helpful, and really just wanting to point you guys towards those resources. I think it's very doable. I think it just takes sitting down and thinking about what you're doing. Somebody mentioned Beautiful Feet Books earlier. There's a resource for you. They've designed classes all the way up to high school. Wayfarer's Curriculum is another one. I love Kathy Jo DeVore. She is the developer of Wayfarers. I love her attitude towards a lot of college history, sciences, philosophy, things like that. It's kind of a classical Charlotte Mason bent. But she typically gives you a couple of different tracks that you can follow. So definitely check that out. I love her attitude towards high school science, not making it a mini college, but still allowing kids to study, but also enjoy science. So lots of good information to be gotten from her site as well. So I hope some of this was helpful to you guys. We'll be back next Thursday. I don't know what the topic is yet. We will let you know as we get a little closer. We're going to throw the link for Wayfarers up there for you. And yes, Tyra, a lot of people ask, are you going all the way through high school? And remember, you do not have to be your child's only teacher to homeschool them. You are the facilitator of their education. You're the coach for their education. You're the mentor and the model for their education. But you do not have to teach them everything. You're just kind of administrating and putting together the package that's going to make them or help them be successful. So there you go. All right, you guys have a great one.